Have you ever wondered what happens when a fearless frontier widow, a silent mountain man with wolf-like companions, and a legendary silver wolf cross paths in a deadly blizzard? In the heart of the mountains, Caroline Lambert's wagon teeters between survival and destruction as wolves circle and storms rage. Yet out of the swirling snow emerges Daniel Hyde, a mysterious hermit rumored to commune with beasts rather than fear them. Their alliance and the stunning standoffs that follow will keep you on the edge of your seat. Want to find out if Caroline's courage and Daniel's wild instincts are enough to escape the wolf's wrath and the crushing force of the winter wilderness? Stick around for the whole tale. And while you're here, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support ensures we can continue sharing exciting stories full of heart-racing action, unlikely friendships, and the timeless clash between man and nature. Hazel Wyatt was used to the silences of the open road. She had crisscrossed countless miles of classic American highways, her big rig humming steadily beneath her as she hauled everything from produce to construction materials. By most measures, she seemed like any other traveling truck driver. A bit tired around the eyes, hair pulled back into a low ponytail, her favorite cap bearing faded letters from some long-forgotten roadside attraction. People who met her during rest stops or fueling sessions would find a soft-spoken, polite woman who always left a generous tip on the counter. But beneath that unassuming exterior lay a past Hazel had carefully sealed away. She had served as an elite operative in the Army's Delta Force, a role that had taken her across oceans and into conflict zones few Americans could imagine. Her old life taught her to sleep lightly, scan every crowd for hidden threats, and keep a healthy dose of skepticism whenever entering unfamiliar territory. On a brisk morning, Hazel guided her 18-wheeler off a lesser-traveled desert road and pulled into a humble spot called Mesa Lily's Roadside Haven. Above the din of her diesel engine, she noticed the neon sign flickering. Open 24 hours. Best pie in the county. The place wasn't much to look at. A single-story diner with a peeling roof, 3 pumps out front, and a beaten-up garage off to one side. It was the kind of place that stayed afloat by offering reliable home cooking and a friendly face to truckers and ranchers. She parked alongside a couple of dusty pickups, exhaling as she set the parking brake. She had been on the road for 11 hours straight and needed hot coffee and a chance to stretch. Inside, the diner still clung to the final hints of the previous night, a mop propped against the corner wall, a sleepy radio DJ's voice crackling through static, and the air carrying the scent of bacon and brewed coffee. Only 2 patrons sat in booths, an older rancher swirling the last of his coffee and a young woman scanning a worn travel guide. Behind the counter, Lydia Morales, owner of the place, was wiping down the display of pies. She was stocky, in her late 50s, her gray hair pinned back in a no-nonsense bun. At her side worked Becky Mason, a spirited waitress who looked no more than 25. Hazel nodded to them both, taking a seat at the counter. Becky offered a smile and poured a mug of fresh coffee. "Rough night on the road?" she asked sympathetically, noticing the tension in Hazel's shoulders. "Yeah," Hazel replied, cupping the warm mug in her hands. "But your sign promised the best pie in the county. I'll be the judge of that." She returned a half-smile that momentarily softened her weary expression. Lydia looked up, setting aside a cherry pie. "We like to think it's worth a stop." She paused, noticing Hazel's dusty jacket. "I recognize that distribution company on your truck. Are you hauling medical supplies or electronics?" Hazel's eyes flickered with caution. "Medical goods," she answered, hoping to keep the conversation light. But before more small talk could unfold, the diner door opened with a jingle, and 2 men in leather vests strode in. They wore patches that read Iron Jaws, a local biker group rumored to be stirring trouble through extortion and intimidation. The taller one had a shaved head and black tattoos coiling over his arms, while the second, sporting a stained bandana and thick goatee, was scanning every corner of the diner with a predator's gaze. A hush settled over the diner as they took their seats in a booth and demanded coffee. The older rancher slunk lower in his seat. The young traveler closed her guide and pretended not to see them. Lydia's knuckles tightened on her dish rag. Only Hazel seemed unaffected, though she was already mentally mapping out her surroundings. She observed how the biker's eyes lingered on the cash register and then on Lydia. It was a script she recognized from years of threat assessment. Her instincts told her trouble had just walked in. Becky approached the newcomers, her smile thin and forced. "Morning, gents. Coffee?" Without waiting for an answer, she set two mugs on the table and poured. Her stance betrayed her nerves. Knees locked, shoulders rigid. The taller biker lifted his mug, took a sip, and grimaced. "You can do better than this," he growled, clinking the mug back onto the table with enough force to make Becky flinch. His partner surveyed the diner. "Where's the owner? We've got business to discuss." His voice carried a tone suggesting there was no point resisting. Lydia came forward, hands on her hips. "I'm Lydia, the owner, and I'm not interested in whatever you're selling." The subtle tremor in her voice was outweighed by her resolve. She'd faced down a variety of tough customers in her decades of running the diner, but these bikers were different. They seemed organized, emboldened, and entirely sure of their control. The shaved-head biker leaned back, crossing his arms over his vest. "Heard a rumor this place might be changing hands. Why not consider new partners?" His insinuation hung in the air. "Not for sale," Lydia retorted. "I'm doing just fine." The bandana-wearing biker let out a low chuckle, his gaze drifting to the few other patrons in the room. "We'll just leave you a friendly reminder that it's smart to cooperate with the iron jaws. Don't make it hard on yourself." A tangible weight pressed on every occupant. The rancher stared at his mug, the traveling young woman clutched her guidebook, and Becky took a single step back, heart pounding. Hazel, finishing the last of her coffee, watched quietly. She had no intention of drawing attention to herself, but her posture and the angle of her chin showed she was fully prepared to act if things escalated. After a moment that felt infinitely longer, the bikers slid from the booth. "We'll be in touch," the taller one muttered. Then they turned and walked out. Through the window, Hazel tracked them as they climbed onto their motorcycles, roaring off into the desert. Becky let out the breath she'd been holding. Lydia rubbed her temples. "This is the second time this month," Lydia said in a voice that quavered with pent-up frustration. "They want to scare me into giving up this diner." She nodded toward Becky's worried expression. "Or they want an illegal arrangement. Protection money, maybe letting them store who knows what in my garage." Hazel glanced at Lydia. "Have you called the authorities?" Lydia sighed. "The local station is small, they're stretched thin. Some folks say the Iron Jaws might have the sheriff's office too intimidated to make a stand, or they just can't pin them down." Nodding, Hazel mulled over the situation. She recalled hearing truck stop chatter about a gang called the Iron Jaws, known for pulling heists and intimidation runs along deserted highways. Usually she would mind her own business, but something about Lydia's determined spirit struck a chord. Hazel also noticed Becky's torn expression, torn between fear and the desire to help Lydia. Outside, the rumble of motorcycles faded, leaving an uneasy quiet that enveloped the little diner. Hazel paid for her breakfast, leaving extra for Becky, and stepped back to her truck. She had deliveries to make, deadlines to meet. The old life she had left behind whispered that sometimes stepping in was the only choice. But so far, no direct threat had come to her. Still, her instincts buzzed. She sensed that turning a blind eye wouldn't keep the trouble away for long. Hazel climbed into her rig, her mind swirling with thoughts of the Iron Jaws. She started the engine, planning to focus on her route and the next delivery. Yet as she pulled onto the highway, the image of Lydia's lined face, stern yet anxious, tugged at her. The diner reminded Hazel of similar establishments overseas, far from any official help, communities forced to fend for themselves. She had spent years operating in precisely those conditions, doing all she could to keep innocents safe. For the next few hours, she drove in contemplative silence, the radio off, the desert passing in a hazy blur of red and yellow rock formations. Eventually, she reached a larger truck stop where she refueled and considered her schedule. She had a major deadline in 2 days, but if she pushed a bit harder, she could handle her delivery a day early. That left a vague notion tugging at her conscience. The possibility of returning to Mesa Lily's roadside haven to see if Lydia needed more help. Why? She questioned herself. She wasn't law enforcement, and she wasn't on a military mission. She was a civilian now, had been for years. Her vow upon leaving Delta Force was to find peace, a way to exist without her every moment overshadowed by potential threats. Yet the training never fully vanished. She still woke from dreams in which she navigated foreign terrain, scanning rooftops and alleyways, and it had saved her life more than once when hauling cargo on America's lonely highways. By late afternoon, she reached her drop-off location, a medical warehouse on the outskirts of a mid-sized city. The staff there were efficient and had her trailer unloaded in less than an hour. As she stood by, arms folded, she scrolled through local news on her phone. One short headline read, "Rural Cafe Harassed by Motorcycle Gang, Vandals Escalate." It did not mention Mesa Lily specifically, but Hazel's gut told her it was related. After finishing her business, she secured her truck and found a motel across the highway. The sky was turning a bruise-colored purple as the sun dipped below the desert horizon. Inside her modest motel room, Hazel rinsed off the day's dust in a lukewarm shower. But her mind refused to relax. She looked up addresses for local law enforcement, the county sheriff's office, scanning any mention of iron jaws. There were scattered reports of property damage, threats, and suspected drug routes, but no large-scale investigations. Hazel considered contacting an old friend from her service days, someone who might have law enforcement ties. But that would stir up a side of her life she'd promised never to revisit. Instead, she turned on the local TV news. Another short clip mentioned biker gangs strong-arming businesses near desert highways, which only cemented the idea that Lydia's diner was now in deeper jeopardy. Finally, she switched off the television and lay on the stiff motel bed, mind racing. She tried to reason. If she got involved, it might blow her cover. If the Iron Jaws discovered she had advanced combat skills, they might retaliate with lethal force, though that same skill set could make all the difference for Lydia and Becky. Despite her better judgment, Hazel found herself quietly deciding that the next day, once she arranged her next load, she would drive back to Lydia's diner. Some part of her was unwilling to let intimidation win unchallenged. Early the next morning, Hazel left the motel and arranged to pick up another haul. She managed to secure a short-distance contract that offered decent pay and conveniently required her to swing back through that desert stretch where Mesa Lilies was located. It felt like everything was lining up, maybe a bit too perfectly. Shoving aside any superstitious thoughts, she climbed into the rig and headed back onto the highway. The scenery was just as rugged and lonely, but her sense of purpose had shifted. Gone was the wandering trucker concerned only with deadlines. In her place was a woman scanning each passing car, every stretch of dirt road, for signs of black leather vests and scowling faces. Over the next 100 miles, she saw a few motorcycles, but none bore the Iron Jaws patch. Relief mixed with an odd disappointment. She needed more information. Were they truly so widespread, or had she stumbled upon a single local chapter? Around midday, she spotted the familiar outline of Mesa Lily's roadside haven up ahead. Something was different. An extra pickup truck sat in the lot, and the rightmost window of the diner was boarded over. Her stomach sank. Pulling in, she parked next to the battered garage. The air outside shimmered with heat, and the place felt too quiet. Inside, the first thing she noticed was that the crowd was smaller than she'd seen before. Some chairs were stacked as if not expecting many customers. Becky stood behind the counter, wearing a fresh bandage on her forearm. Lydia, at a nearby table, was consoling a rancher who seemed shaken. As Hazel approached, she saw an undeniable tension etched into Lydia's features. Becky's face brightened at the sight of Hazel, though worry still clung to her voice. "Hazel, you came back?" "I did." "Are you all okay? What happened to the window?" Hazel asked, nodding toward the boarded-up spot. Lydia let out a weary sigh. "A couple more Iron Jaws came by last night, broke the window, threw some paint on the walls, and threatened to return if I didn't give them full access to the diner and the garage. They roughed up Becky a bit when she tried to stop them." Hazel's gaze flickered to Becky's bandaged arm. Becky shrugged, half in embarrassment. "I was trying to tell them to leave, and one of them shoved me into the glass display. The cut's not too bad, but—" She paused, swallowing. "They said they'd come back with more riders next time." Hazel felt anger stir in her. She'd encountered bullies during her service, but the Iron Jaws seemed intent on systematic terror. "I'm sorry you had to face that. Did you call the sheriff?" "We did," Lydia replied. "A deputy showed up 2 hours later, took photos, wrote a report. He seemed sympathetic, but said there was only so much he could do." She motioned to the rancher who was finishing a cup of coffee with trembling hands. "They've targeted a few more people, landowners who won't cooperate." Nodding grimly, Hazel folded her arms. "Maybe it's time to organize a community watch of sorts. People who won't just roll over. That might keep them at bay until the sheriff can muster more help. Lydia's eyebrows rose. You sound like you know what you're doing. Hazel offered a tight smile. Let's say I've seen enough to know bullies only respect strength. Over the next hour, Hazel listened to Lydia's account of the Ironjaw's harassments. They demanded storage space in the diner's back room or the attached garage for unspecified goods. The local rumor was that they used these rural stops to funnel stolen merchandise, drugs, or illegal weapons from one chapter of the gang to another. Lydia had refused, wanting no part in criminal operations. Now she and Becky were paying the price in broken windows and battered confidence. Hazel suggested calling a few local ranchers and business owners who had also faced threats. If enough of you band together, you could keep watch, coordinate with each other, she said. Set up a chain of calls or texts if these bikers show up again. Lydia turned to Becky, who brightened at the idea. I'll set up a group text, Becky said, and we can make sure we're never alone if they ride in after dark. Meanwhile, Hazel asked about the garage's owner, a man named Neil Trenton, who often fixed flat tires for passing trucks. He's out on a supply run, Becky answered, but he said he'd come by after closing to see about reinforcing the garage doors. Quietly, Hazel walked around the diner, inspecting the layout from a defensive standpoint. There were several windows that could be smashed in easily, and the back exit was secured by nothing more than a flimsy chain and latch. If the iron jaws returned in force, a locked door wouldn't slow them for more than a few seconds. She couldn't help recalling how, in her old line of work, she'd fortify safe houses in remote villages, boarding windows, installing crossbars on doors, setting up vantage points. It was unsettling how similar this rural diner situation felt. She returned to Lydia. You might think about some basic reinforcements, she said, trying not to sound too militant. Stronger locks, maybe cameras, whatever you can afford. We barely make enough as it is, Lydia replied, frowning. But I'll see what we can do. Satisfied for the moment, Hazel prepared to step back outside. She needed to check her own trailer, which she had left idling. But Lydia stopped her, voice hushed. Be careful, Hazel. The gang might already have you on their radar. They saw you here before, and you don't exactly look like someone who scares easily. Hazel gave her a calm nod. I'll watch my back. As she made her way to the truck, the midday sun blazed overhead, reflecting off the gravel in shimmering waves. She found no immediate signs of sabotage around her rig. A relief, but she remained cautious. The iron jaws might be cunning enough to choose their moment, possibly when she was least expecting it. She told herself she had done enough by suggesting a watch group. She could have just driven on, letting the local folks handle their own problems. Yet something kept her there, leaning against her truck, scanning the horizon. She sensed that things were about to escalate, and that she might be the only one in position to push back when they did. That evening, the makeshift plan took shape. Lydia decided to close the diner 2 hours early, around 8 p.m., so a few of the local ranchers and small business owners could gather without fear of Iron Jaw's intrusions. Hazel stayed, parking her rig around the side of the building to avoid drawing too much attention. Inside, the lights were turned low, and Becky brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Neil, the garage owner, arrived with lumber for board-up repairs, followed by 2 ranchers who introduced themselves as Clint and Miriam. Both had been threatened by the bikers in the past month. The small group settled into a back booth, the hum of the refrigerator providing an odd soundtrack to their meeting. Lydia cleared her throat. Thank you for coming. We all know why we're here. The Iron Jaws have been terrorizing local spots, threatening to burn barns, vandalizing stores, and pushing us to store illegal goods. We've got to do something. Clint, a tall man with sun-leathered skin, nodded. They came to my ranch a week ago, said they'd burn my hay bales if I didn't pay a toll. I chased them off with a shotgun, but I'm worried they'll come back stronger. Miriam, short with braided hair, added, They slashed my truck tires outside the feed store. This is beyond petty crime. It's systematic intimidation. If we all stand alone, we'll keep being victimized. Neil spoke next, voice gruff but determined. I've tried calling the sheriff again and again. The deputy's nice enough, but says the gang is slippery, always moving. Unless we catch them red-handed in a serious crime, charges don't stick. We need a plan to alert each other. Maybe set up a patrol? Everyone's eyes turned to Hazel as though they sensed she was the one who might have experience. She sipped her coffee, carefully choosing words. "I'm no strategist," she began, measuring how much of her background she should reveal. "But if you want to deter them, show a unified front. They rely on hitting one target at a time, counting on that target to be isolated and afraid. If we share information, license plates, times they show up, descriptions, and keep an eye out, we can respond quickly. They want easy pickings, not a fight." Clint pounded the table softly. "I like it. We'll exchange phone numbers tonight, get on one group text. Anyone sees suspicious bikes, we sound the alarm." Neil nodded. "And maybe we can set up rotating watch. I'm near the garage most nights, so I can keep the lights on. If we catch them messing around, we record it on our phones for evidence." Lydia exhaled, relief creeping into her posture. "At least it's something. I've been afraid for Becky and me, especially after they came in here tossing threats. If we stand alone, we'll go under. But together, maybe it's enough." While they hashed out details, Hazel found herself stepping into a familiar role, coaching them on how to position vehicles near building corners, ways to ensure camera angles caught the license plates of passing motorcycles, and even simple perimeter checks. She stopped short of teaching them paramilitary tactics. Still, the others listened intently. They recognized that this soft-spoken trucker carried a deep well of knowledge about self-defense. Outside, the desert night settled into an eerie stillness. Through the diner's windows, the silhouettes of cacti and distant rock formations stood like silent sentinels under the moonlight. The small group parted ways near 10 p.m., each person solemn, clutching a slip of paper with the new group's contact list. They knew trouble could strike at any moment, but for now they had found solidarity, and that might make all the difference. Over the next few days, the watch group put their plan into motion. Clint and Miriam took turns driving past the diner late at night. Neil propped security lights around his garage to illuminate the lot. Becky programmed speed dial alerts on her phone. Lydia tried to balance normal business hours with the new vigilance. A sense of guarded optimism took root. It felt like they were stepping out of victimhood. Meanwhile, Hazel accepted another short-term contract hauling goods north. She'd disappear for a day or two, then circle back through the area, each time stopping in to check on the diner. Late one afternoon, she arrived to find Lydia and Becky standing outside, arms crossed, frowning at fresh graffiti sprayed across the diner's side wall, a snarling iron jaw with "We don't forget" scrawled in dripping red paint. Hazel's stomach sank. The iron jaws clearly weren't deterred. "That showed up last night," Lydia muttered, kicking at a loose gravel patch with her shoe. "We saw a couple of bikes on the highway around midnight, but no one realized they'd done this until morning." Neil was already there, rummaging in the back of his pickup for paint thinner. "I'll at least lighten it up, then we can repaint tomorrow." Hazel stepped forward to examine the graffiti more closely. "They're making it personal. Have you told the others in the watch group?" Becky nodded. Miriam and Clint both came by to see it. Miriam suggested we keep a vigil each night for the next week. She's got her nephew ready to help. Hazel wondered if her presence might be triggering the gang to double down. The diner was a strategic spot, travelers, truckers, and a building that could hide contraband. The iron jaws were likely furious that Lydia was refusing them, and now she had help. That alone could spur them to escalate. "I'll stay tonight," Hazel offered. "I can park my rig at the edge of the lot, keep an eye out for any suspicious movement." Lydia offered a grateful if worried smile. "Thank you, but I don't want you risking your life for us." Hazel waved off the concern. "I've faced worse situations than a pack of bullies, and you folks have become friends. Friends look out for each other." That night, they put the plan into action. Clint set up near the main road with binoculars, occasionally texting updates about passing vehicles. Miriam waited at her ranch with a truck and a rifle. Ready to drive in if an alert went out. Becky kept the diner's lights low, while Lydia locked the doors earlier than usual. Hazel settled in her truck, engine off, windows cracked to let in the desert breeze. She stayed awake by sipping black coffee from a thermos. The hours ticked by, and her mind wandered to the day she left the military. She'd promised herself never to get entangled in conflicts that had no official backing, no structured chain of command. Yet here she was, coordinating a small community watch against criminal intimidation. She reminded herself that the difference was personal choice. No orders, just her conscience. Around 1 in the morning, Hazel spotted headlights on the distant highway. She quietly alerted the group chat. Car or bikes approaching from the east. Clint's reply came back seconds later. I see them. 3 bikes. They just passed me, heading straight toward the diner. In the hush of the desert, Hazel steadied her breathing. She slipped on her old military jacket, its pockets filled with small items like a flashlight, zip ties, and a simple first aid kit. She wasn't eager for a firefight, but if the bikers intended harm, she would not stand idly by. At the same time, she had no illusions. 3 bikes could mean more riders a mile behind or spread out in a pincer movement. She typed a quick note to the group. Miriam, stand by. We might need backup. Miriam's response came promptly. Ready. Give the signal if they stop at the diner. Soon, the low rumble of motorcycle engines grew louder. From her vantage point in the driver's seat, Hazel saw 3 silhouettes glide off the highway and into the lot. Their headlights swept across the gravel, illuminating the diner's facade. Hazel hunched lower, not wanting to reveal her presence too soon. The motorcycles lined up near the boarded window. One rider dismounted, removed his helmet, and gestured for the others to kill their engines. In the moonlight, Hazel recognized the shaved head in the Iron Jaws emblem on his vest. He pulled out a small crowbar and walked toward the diner's door, chuckling. Another rider, a wiry figure with a bandana, followed with a can of spray paint. Hazel's heart hammered. This is more vandalism or a break-in attempt, she thought, texting the watch group. They're here, armed with tools. Without waiting for a response, she eased open the truck's door and slipped out, keeping low. A swirl of dust caught the beams of a streetlight as she crept across the lot. The only advantage she had now was the element of surprise. From inside the diner, Becky dimly saw the men approaching. She flicked the interior lights off, but the front door was reinforced. Thankfully, Hazel reached a battered pickup that belonged to Lydia, crouching behind it for partial cover. The bikers jostled the diner's door, the crowbar scraping metal. Hey, no one's home, sneered the shaved-head rider, so I guess we'll let ourselves in. His accomplice kicked the door. A dull clang rang out. Hazel clenched her jaw. She had to decide whether to reveal herself or wait for the cavalry. Then a text from Miriam lit her screen. My truck won't start. Battery's dead. I'm calling Clint to see if he can swing around. Hazel muttered a curse under her breath. Clint was likely a half-mile down the road. By the time he arrived, the door could be off its hinges. She quietly approached, keeping the diner's wall between herself and the main group. With a swift motion, she turned the corner, flashlight in one hand and her old service pistol in the other, hidden behind her thigh. That's enough, she called, trying to keep her voice steady, but loud enough to carry. The biker spun around, crowbar and spray paint can at the ready. The third rider, still on his bike, revved the engine as if to intimidate. Hazel clicked her flashlight beam onto them. Step away from the door. One of them smirked. Or what? You planning to scold us? Quietly, Hazel dropped the flashlight, letting it roll on the ground so its beam angled upward. No, she said, calm as steel. I'm telling you to leave before this escalates. The shaved-head biker snorted. We outnumber you, lady. You might want to mind your own business. Before Hazel could respond, the biker with the spray paint lunged, hurling the can at her. She sidestepped, but it clipped her shoulder and paint splattered across her jacket. She brought her pistol up. Last warning, back off. The tension exploded like a drawn bowstring snapping. Shaved Head tossed his crowbar at Hazel's feet and rushed forward in a bull-like charge, hoping to disarm her. Hazel pivoted on one foot, bringing the butt of her pistol down against his forearm before he could grab it. He let out a shocked grunt as he stumbled, losing momentum. The second biker, bandana flapping, lunged next, swinging a chain. Hazel ducked, pivoting to keep them both in view. She fired a single warning shot into the gravel, the deafening crack echoing in the still night. Get down, she yelled, her voice carrying the authority of all those covert missions she'd once led. For an instant, both men hesitated, eyes wide with shock. But the momentary advantage vanished as the one on the bike decided to rev toward Hazel. The motorcycle lurched forward, its wheel spitting pebbles. Hazel had seconds to react. She dove sideways, landing hard on her shoulder. The biker zoomed past, missing her by inches, then skidded to a stop in a plume of dust. Shaved Head and bandana recovered, cursing a blue streak. They were furious now, like cornered animals. From inside the diner, Becky peered through a narrow gap in the boarded-up window, eyes wide. She recognized Hazel's unwavering stance and realized, with a jolt, that the trucker was no ordinary civilian. Lydia was on the phone, her hands shaking, calling the sheriff's office repeatedly. Meanwhile, Hazel swallowed a rush of adrenaline. She tried to hold them at bay with her pistol, but the trio spread out, attempting to flank her. The rider on the bike circled around, headlight aimed at her eyes. Bandana Man whipped his chain again, and Hazel ducked, then countered with a sharp kick to his wrist. The chain rattled to the ground. "Stay back," she warned again, feeling her heart thunder. She knew in a fair fight, she could handle three aggressors, especially if they lacked firearms. But any misstep could still be lethal if they managed to corner her, or if hidden weapons appeared. The shaved-head biker recovered the crowbar, brandishing it like a club. "You're a dead woman," he sneered, stepping carefully toward Hazel. "Nobody crosses the iron jaws." Suddenly, headlights appeared on the highway. Clint's truck rumbled into the lot, screeching to a halt. He hopped out, rifle in hand, though he looked a bit shaky. "Drop your weapons," he shouted, voice cracking, but still determined. This new arrival momentarily broke the biker's confidence. The man with the crowbar swore and glanced at the biker on the motorcycle, hoping for a quick exit. Hazel seized that moment of indecision. She advanced, pistol trained on Crowbar Man, leaving him no room to rush her again without getting shot. Bandana Man lifted his arms in a half-surrender, backing away. The motorcycle rider revved again, possibly considering a second attempt to run Hazel over. But Clint aimed the rifle squarely in his path. Tires squealed as two more vehicles pulled in, and red-blue flashes strobed the night. Deputies had arrived, attracted by the 911 calls Lydia and Becky had placed. Sirens wailed, and the yard flooded with the sound of doors slamming, guns being drawn, and authoritative commands from uniformed officers. The Iron Jaws members realized they were outmatched. Bandana Man dropped to his knees. Crowbar Man let his weapon clatter to the ground, and the motorcycle rider raised both hands, engine idling. Hazel kept her gun level but stepped back, letting the deputies take control. Chaos ensued for a few minutes as police disarmed the bikers, cuffed them, and escorted them to waiting patrol cars. Nearby, Becky emerged from the diner, trembling but relieved, while Lydia stood just behind her, still clutching the phone. Clint lowered his rifle, exhaling a ragged breath. Hazel quietly holstered her pistol, stepping away to let the officers do their work. A weary-eyed deputy approached her. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked, glancing at the paint splattered on her jacket and the scrape on her cheek. Hazel nodded, trying to slow her pounding heart. "I'm fine. They're the ones who need medical attention, if anything." She noticed that the shaved-head biker's wrist was swelling, and Bandana Man had a bruise forming on his forearm. The deputy scribbled notes, eyeing Hazel with curiosity. He'd likely wonder how a single truck driver managed to hold off three bikers without sustaining serious injury. Hazel, for her part, was in no mood to explain her background. Once the Iron Jaws were locked in the patrol cars, the lead officer, Sergeant Soren, spoke to Lydia. "We appreciate your call. These guys might face multiple charges: trespassing, attempted assault, destruction of property. Hopefully that'll send a clear message to the rest of their gang." Lydia rubbed her eyes. "I hope so. They've been terrorizing us for weeks." She shot Hazel a grateful look. "We couldn't have held out if Hazel hadn't been here." Sergeant Soren turned to Hazel. "You saved them from a nasty situation. We owe you, and if you don't mind, we'll need a statement from you about what happened." "Of course," Hazel replied softly. As the night wound down, the deputies took photographs of the crowbar, the chain, and the scuffed door. Clint gave his version of events, explaining how he arrived just before the police. Becky slipped away to fetch coffee and water for everyone, her hands still shaking. Hazel stepped aside, leaning against her truck, pressing a hand to her throbbing shoulder. A distinct wave of déjà vu washed over her. She'd been in so many post-conflict debriefs in foreign countries. Yet here she was in a quiet desert town, facing a criminal gang. The deputy finished taking Hazel's statement close to 3 a.m. By then, the temperature had dropped sharply, and a breeze kicked up dust. The Iron Jaws were driven off in separate patrol cars, and the police presence began to thin. Clint's truck rumbled away, though he gave Hazel a silent nod of respect before departing. Lydia urged Hazel to come back into the diner. Becky had prepared a small booth with a first aid kit, a fresh pot of coffee, and a slice of pie. "Please sit," Becky said gently. "Let me check your shoulder." Hazel allowed herself to settle into the booth. The adrenaline crash left her exhausted and sore. Becky carefully cleaned the minor abrasion near her collarbone, her eyes filled with gratitude and a bit of awe. Lydia hovered nearby. "That was impressive," Lydia said softly. "Where did you learn that?" Hazel hesitated, glancing down. "I served in the army for a while," she answered, giving the smallest glimpse of truth. "You pick up skills." They didn't press for more details. Instead, Lydia reached out and gently squeezed Hazel's free hand. "Thank you for everything." A wave of emotion rose in Hazel's chest. She had spent so long avoiding attachments, living behind the wheel, never staying too long, or explaining too much. But in these past days, she'd grown attached to this tiny corner of the desert, to Lydia's fierce determination and Becky's hopeful smile. She looked around the diner, remembering how it had felt so ordinary when she first walked in. Now it was a place she had fought for, a place that felt worth defending. "Anytime," Hazel murmured, her voice catching slightly. "I'm just glad it's over." But she knew it might not be truly over. The Iron Jaws were larger than the three men arrested that night. Their leader, known as Talon, was rumored to be ruthless. If he heard about his crew being taken down here, there was a good chance he'd come sniffing around for revenge. And if that time came, Hazel suspected she'd be right here, ready to stand with Lydia, Becky, and everyone else. In the end, Hazel and her new allies discover the true power of unity. By banding together, they've safeguarded Mesa Lily's roadside haven and shaken the Iron Jaw's grip on the region. Though scars remain, both in the shattered windows and in Hazel's old injuries, hope triumphs over fear. Lydia can keep the diner lights glowing, Becky can greet travelers with a genuine smile, and Neil can repair engines in peace. From a personal perspective, it's a reminder that even the loneliest roads can lead you to a place worth fighting for. Sometimes the toughest battles forge the strongest bonds, and heroes can appear in the most unexpected roles, like a modest truck driver carrying a hidden past. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment to share your favorite moment, or let us know how you might defend your own hometown. Let's keep the conversation rolling.